One of the things I see discussed the most in the L Word fandom is what has gone on between the original show and Generation Q. And when talking about Bette and Tina, most people want to know how, when, why did we end up where we ended up in season 1 of Generation Q with Bette and Tina divorced, and also in episode 6 when they're discussing some of these things that we thought they had resolved in the original show. So today we're going to be talking about the Tibette timeline, and I'm going to be going over in excruciating detail how I think this all went down, because there are bits and pieces that I've been able to pick up from the original show. There's some stuff here that's from deleted scenes, that's from, again, the bloody interrogation tapes, which was funny when I mentioned that in a video last week, because I've seen so many people talking about them since then that they had no idea they even existed. So I love when stuff like that happens. And I'm also going to be mainly focusing on the interim between the OG and Gen Q, because that's obviously where all the missing pieces are. And there was some things mentioned in episodes 1 and 2 that I think actually gave us a little more insight into what's gone on in the in-between time. So let's get right into it. So I'm starting off in like the 60s, 70s. We've never really got like a clean date on how old pretty much anybody is on the show. I do know that they have mentioned before that Tina is younger than Bette, and I heard on a couple of interviews before that when the original show started, Bette was supposed to be like around 37, 38, which is scary because that's really like close to my age. But anyway, that is what we're kind of working with. We know Bette was raised in Philadelphia. And then about Tina, we know that Tina was living somewhere else as a child, and her dad was the mayor of like their small town. And then when her dad had all these affairs, her mom picked her and her 2 siblings up and they moved to Georgia.
My mom died when I graduated from college. My father, he had an affair with this pretty young law student who clerked for him at his first job, and my mother was never threatened.
So you wouldn't mind if Bette had an affair with this Kelly?
I'm not saying that. I'm not my mother.
And then Tina's mom passed away when she was in college, and then her sister, she has one other sibling as well, but she mentions a sister that is now like a born again Christian who like thinks she's going to hell. So I don't expect to see any of Tina's family members at the wedding. We have the possibility of Bette's mom, but anyway, that's kind of the level we're starting out. We know Bette went to Yale. I'm assuming Tina moved to California and went to university in California or started working in the industry, because when we meet her in the original, I mean, she's a little bit older than Bette. So say she's like 32, 33 when the original starts. That would put her like really young, like 26 or something when we see her in 97. So again, these are like very loose, you know, I don't know any of this for sure, obviously. And we know in 96 was around when Bette moved to California, because Alice makes this reference to when she first met Bette, and Bette was still working at the Manhattan Drawing Center. So she obviously moved from New York then, and her and Alice saw each other for a little bit. Then they became like really good friends. And then we know in 1997-ish is when Bette and Tina met at the Bette Porter Gallery, and then they started going out from there. So sometime between the late 90s and early 2000s, I mean, we don't know a huge amount about this time. We know that they went to India on holiday, and we know that early on, probably in the late 90s, was when they became like friends with Shane and Dana and everybody. And also Bette and Tina moved into their house in WeHo.
When I see that print, I think of our old house. I think of us. I didn't want someone else to have a piece of us. Well, I'm so glad that you have it now.
So 2004 is when we meet them, and that is when they're obviously trying to have a baby, and we know everything that kind of happens in the show. I'm not going to go over this in really any detail because we know what happens. You know, they have the whole carpenter thing, and then they split up, and then they get back together, and then they split up, and then they get back together, and then...
Did you fuck all night before you told her I was the love of your life this morning? Well, I hope you had fun blowing off some steam with the carpenter. Tina! You've been avoiding me. No, I haven't. Okay, yeah, maybe I have.
So we have that whole thing. So we fast forward to the end of the OG, which is 2009. So at the end of the original show, Bette and Tina were supposed to go to New York. Now, I'm going to say something, maybe this is like controversial, but I don't think they moved to New York. And this is my reasoning. We have not had any reference whatsoever to this. Like, nobody has ever said anything about New York in Generation Q. And could I chalk it up to there's a lot of shit that they haven't mentioned in Generation Q, and again, they can't keep their own timeline straight. So also, I think that somebody who knew a lot about the OG should have been on set to like sort stuff. Like, they should have had a little line or something in there, or even in there to say like they didn't go. I think that the whole thing with Jenny, like, maybe threw them into like a bit of, oh, like, we can't go now, or, you know, who knows what sort of like state like Shane was in and things. So I don't think that they went, because I've never heard anything. It could totally prove me wrong. In the finale, they could reference, hey, remember when we lived in New York? But even Angie and stuff, like, nobody's ever said anything. So I don't think they went to New York. And maybe that's where like we started to get a bit of like the issue stuff. But also what I'm going to say next could totally apply if they did move to New York anyway. So this is like 2009, 2010. We know they were engaged at the end of the OG. And I would say within like a year, so say 2010, they would get married. So over the next few years, there's not too much that like obviously I could know, but I'm going to put a timestamp in here of 2015 because we got a little hint at what was going on in 2015 in the first episode of season 3, which I don't know whether anybody else noticed this, but Tina references that she is on the 9th season of her show, and she talks about the show filming in Toronto, and a lot of the shows that do that, I know like a lot of the CW shows film in Vancouver, so I'm going to assume it's something like that. Like, it's gonna be a scripted show, I'm assuming. And most of those shows, like, if they start, say they're like Grey's Anatomy, and they start, you know, and they have like a first half season, or like they're a made to order pilot half season or something like that. So let's say she starts that job in 2015, and she starts it as like things are not going well with her and Bette, and she takes it as like, oh, I'm going to be traveling a lot or spending like, you know, a few months of the year here. And that's when we're led to believe like Tina is the one that caused the split, that she's the one who wanted to split.
I still miss the kind of love that I had with Tina. It made me feel alive. I never thought she would fall in love with someone else. Everything changed when she left me.
And I mean, this isn't like known for a fact, but from the most of the references that are in season 1, it seems as though Tina like met Carrie, and that's why she initiated the split. So I mean, I don't know whether they're still like carrying on with that, but that is what they led us to believe in season 1. So with Tina working on her show in 2015, you could say then after, you know, a year of that, it probably exacerbated the difficulties they were going through and like magnified them. So next year, 2016, you could probably say it all came to a head, and doing the trial separation, we would know going into 2017 2017 is when they would get divorced. And we also know from the stuff from season 1 that 2017, like around the time they're getting divorced, is when Kit dies. So that was when they actually like signed the papers, from what Tina said in season 1.
You know, Felicity was there for me when Kit died. I wish I could have been there. You could have at least come to the funeral.
I would have made it harder for you. We had just gotten divorced.
So Kit passes away in 2017. Bette and Tina are divorced, and things are going badly for Bette. That's when she's working, you know, the whole like Felicity thing. And I would say that she had to decide in 2018 that she was running for mayor, because season 1 of Gen Q is in 2019. So you could say 2017, Kit's died. Bette goes through like her year of like mourning and like getting things together, the divorce, everything. And then 2018, she's like, I need to honor Kit some way or do something. And that's when she decides to run for mayor.
I cheated on my ex-wife.
Does she know you were unfaithful?
Yes, she knows.
My father never accepted me, ever. To the day he died, he called my partner, the woman that I love beyond measure, he called her my friend, as if our love was less than.
Now, we run into Generation Q in 2019. If you watch season 1, anytime that they have like any reference to a date, like on a phone, Shane's birthday, anything, they have just removed the dates from everything. I've looked at every episode. There's no date at all. So, and even when I went to set, I looked at that Gigi, Nat, and Alice paper, and there's no date on it either. So I really went above and beyond here. So the thing about this is that I'm going to use what's happened with season 2 and 3 as kind of like the evidence for why I think this is the case. Every other season of Gen Q has aired, you know, when it's aired, and the timeline has always been the few months before that. So with season 2, it aired August to October. And what was happening on the show was like April, May, June. And then with now, we're having the show obviously airing November to January. And it is August, September, October, November, December on the show. So season 1 aired from December until like the very end of January, because it was only eight episodes. So I'm going to guess that the timeline of Gen Q season 1 is like September, October, November-ish, because that would kind of make sense with like Bette's, you know, campaign and everything like that taking place during that time. I know a lot of the LA mayoral elections are on in March, but there was a recent one that was in November, so that would kind of line up. So using everything that happens in Gen Q is kind of what I also use to kind of back up what I've just said about like the timeline with Bette and Tina's divorce and Tina meeting Carrie and stuff, because it obviously didn't just happen. Like, it didn't happen in 2018 or 2019. So it seems like there's been a bit of time on it. And like, obviously for Tina and Carrie to get engaged, I would say they would had to be going out at least like a year or two. And, you know, it just, that makes sense to me. And then also when you're considering all the other stuff, like when in season 3, episode 2, when Bette's saying like, oh, it's been a long time, like, it obviously hasn't just been like 2 or 3 years, like 5 or 6 years makes sense for her to say that.
It's been a long time. And different years. So beautiful.
So we obviously know now that episode 1, well, again, I say timeline, episode 1 takes place August, September. It takes place over one day, but it's 2 months. And we know the Bette running through traffic and them going to Toronto happens on September 22nd.
Get in! Just get in!
The wedding seems to be taking place towards the end of the year, January 2023. So episode 9, if we have nudge, nudge, wink, wink, an engagement party sort of rehearsal, everything, and then we see the wedding in the finale, it most likely will be the end of the timeline and then walking off into the sunset together in the end of 2022, the beginning of 2023. So that's what I think. I will obviously put a screen grab of the chart that I've done in my Instagram stories, and I'll put it on the screen here for a little bit so that if you want to look at it or like take a screenshot of it, you can and have a little laugh. But that's what I think the Tibette timeline is, and I have so many more advent calendar videos coming. Make sure to subscribe and comment on this one if you want to win some L Word and Bette Tina goodies. Don't forget to follow me on social media, check out my merch store and my Patreon, and come back tomorrow for another L Word advent calendar video. As always, make sure to stay safe, take care of yourselves, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye guys.